What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode here. This is just going to be kind of the final video on this 1JZ swap series that I've been working on. The car is in a state where I would consider it finished, and I know cars aren't always, the project car is never really finished, but this project has been done for probably about 2 months, I'd say. I've been driving it around, having a lot of fun with it. So I figured I'd film another video that explains basically the finishing processes, what I did to save some money on the swap, and I'm also going to include how much it costs total to swap a 1JZ into an IS300. I'm confident that I've done it cheaper than anybody else. So I cut a lot of corners on this car because it's a drift car. The chassis is not great, and I'm probably going to be reshelling it someday. And this was a very experimental process, trying to save money and get a 1JZ into the car as cheap as possible, but yet still be reliable, fast, and accomplish the ultimate goal of having a 300 plus horsepower reliable IS300 with a manual trans. So I'll just kind of go over what I've done to it. Start in the interior here. Gauges are just eBay gauges. They're really cheap. I'll go over the cost there, the pods, everything's from eBay. Just drilled right into the center dash and the boost gauges on the dash there. And then also I mounted my HKS fuel cut dispenser right there so that it can be adjusted on the fly. It's an easy place to adjust that if needed. Once it's set, you don't really need to use it anymore. And then you can also see my Willwood proportioning valves right there, where I can tune the rear brakes from the driver's seat. And there's also going to be a hydraulic handbrake installed in line right there as well. Eventually, that's something that I got to finish up. I'll show you guys the final, what the engine bay looks like. Some things that still need to be buttoned up in here. Mainly the power steering reservoir needs to be mounted better. But here's the final product in the engine bay. So it looks fairly stock, as far as something that you would see typically in like a Crown or a Chaser, a 110 Chaser or a 171 Crown. It's pretty much stock. I got the stock radiator there. Cooling is fine. I got 2 electric fans right there, which are ran to a switch. I'll explain later why you have to do that. Everything functions like factory. The only thing that does not work is the fan switch, obviously, which I'm running an aftermarket fan switch. The coolant temperature gauge on the gauge cluster does not work, so I'm running an aftermarket coolant temp gauge. And cruise control doesn't work. It never actually worked on this chassis, so I'm not sure if it has to do with the swap. I'm sure it has something to do with the swap, but it never worked on this chassis to begin with. So you're not going to have a functioning cooling fan. You're not going to have a functioning coolant temp gauge, and apart from that, everything else works. I mean, it works flawlessly. It's very daily driverable, but obviously you put your foot into it and it turns into a monster, and the sound is amazing. Estimate of, or I'm sorry, it's not a rough estimate. This is an exact number of everything that I've purchased to do the 1JZ swap and the final cost for everything. Now, this is going to vary because of a few different factors. Let's start with the engine and trans. That was $1,700 or almost $1,800 shipped to my door. And I think that the prices have actually gone up. I purchased this swap almost a year ago, and JZ stuff keeps going up in price. I got it off eBay from, I think it was JDM California. But what I can tell you is when you order your stuff, make sure that you're at your house when it's delivered and inspect it for damage, before you sign the paperwork for acceptance. My swap came, it was wrapped in black plastic, and I could see that something had fallen on it or it scraped something. So the shipper had me unpackage the engine, and then note all the damage. So it had a bad, the MAF was damaged, and some of the turbo coolant lines were damaged. There was a coolant temp sensor that was damaged, and so I noted all that in the shipping document, and the shipper made a claim, and they got me a $250 refund for the damages. I purchased an extra ECU because it was a good deal, just because it was a good deal on Facebook. The gauge pod was $9, just an eBay gauge pod. $12 eBay boost gauge. I would not recommend that because my boost gauge is off by about 3 pounds, and I took the gauge apart trying to fix it, and I think it's even more off now. So I need to get a new boost gauge. eBay water temp gauge, just a cheap eBay water temp gauge. That was $24. It works great. The sensor housing, which goes on the upper radiator hose, was $12. $27 for a MAF. If you look in my previous videos, you'll see the part number that you can use. It's a Subaru MAF, and it'll save you well over $100 on a MAF. I wanted to get a brand new MAF because even though my shipper sent me a new one because it was damaged, I wanted to have a brand new one because a MAF is very important on these JZs. $39 for some intercooler bends, $28 for those two 12-inch fans I'm running on the radiator, $3 switch, $8 for some miscellaneous couplers that go on the turbo and on the throttle body there. 2.25 and 2.5. They're just special custom couplers that you're going to need to buy. $20 for a super upper radiator hose, $50 for the IS300 intake. That's just a GE intake, and the reason you want that is because it will accept the factory mass airflow sensor. You don't have to get that fabricated. The Camry throttle cable, that is expensive. If you can find that in the junkyard, you can save a bunch of money, but I got one brand new. $50 for some stainless pipe that I ordered, a 5-foot section for my downpipe for my fabricator to make that. Some exhaust gaskets. The turbo flange, that is a difficult part to find now. That's a it's the 1JZ 3-bolt turbo flange that bolts directly to the turbo. And what I used was a Mark IV 1.8T Jetta downpipe. I used that downpipe because it had the O2 sensor bungs in the location that I want, and the flex section and everything. And I just ordered the turbo flange, gave my fabricator the downpipe in the car, and he made it work for around $100. The fabrication cost is right there, $100. The Aristo fuel pump, you can save money by going with a Walbro, but I wanted to maintain stock fuel return since it's inside the chassis. So I'd highly recommend just putting an Aristo fuel pump in. The Aristo fuel pump is good for 500 horsepower, I believe. So I'm never going to get to those power numbers. Had to order an OEM remain seal. My eBay intercooler kit, actually that was Amazon, I believe. I did buy another ECU, just an extra one to have, and I'm glad I did because my original ECU that I bought was bad. And there's my downpipe fabrication, HKS fuel cut dispenser, and then I had some miscellaneous heater hoses that you probably, I could have just reused the old ones, I think. ABS delete, that is not necessary either. That was $50, and a wideband is also not necessary because I am running stock boost on this car. It's completely stock. I do want to tell you the fuel cut issues. When you hit around 13 to 14 pounds, some of the 171 or 110 ECUs will hit fuel cut. And the fuel cut dispenser is one of the BPU mods. I'm not running I'm running stock boost, and with the added flow from the intake and my 3-inch downpipe and 2.5, I think, or 2 3/4 stainless exhaust, it upped the boost to the threshold at where the ECU cuts fuel. So I had to get the HKS fuel cut dispenser installed to combat that issue. Basically, it's a straightforward install. Basically just 2 wires and then power and ground to the HKS FCD. There's the coolant temp sensor that I'm running, or sender that I'm running. But yeah, that's pretty much it as far as the swap goes. I'm confident I've done it cheaper than anybody, and it's very functional and very reliable. like this video. I just wanted to show everybody. A lot of people have been giving me a lot of crap about when I tell them I've done the 1JZ swap, you know, namely on Facebook. Lots of people are telling me it's impossible to do it for under $3,000, and I just wanted to make a video showing that it is absolutely possible. I did it for around $2,800, and you know, to put things into perspective, I have well over 300 horsepower, probably pushing 340, 350 horsepower on this thing, and it's, you know, $2,800 is cheaper than, you know, to put things into perspective, it's cheaper than like a B series swap on a Honda Civic. So you know, I think that's why the prices on JZ stuff are going up, is because of, you know, people like me finding, you know, cheaper and easier ways to do these swaps. You know, it's often been the norm to just, you know, buy a JZ and then you got to buy a swap harness and then you got to buy an aftermarket ECU, and that will quickly double your total investment into the swap. And you can absolutely run the stock ECU. Go back and watch some of my old videos. I have a video out there that shows you how to wire up the stock ECU into the IS300, or really into any chassis. So go back and check out my old videos on the swap process and stuff. You'll find a lot of information to save money. I have everything documented pretty well over the last winter, and yeah, I'm just trying to help everybody out here. But as far as, you know, the shop goes, and it's the off season, it's winter time now, so I'm going to introduce a couple new projects to the channel here pretty soon. I got this Civic that I've owned for 10 years. I'm going to try to get it back on the road. It's a EG Coupe. This is my old track car, so I'm going to get that thing back on the road. And then I just picked this up last night. This is another 1JZ IS300 that it's an abandoned project. It's been sitting for, I think, 2 or 3 years, and the previous owner just couldn't afford to finish the swap. He was under the impression he needed a swap harness and an ECU. I told him I'd wire it up for him and everything, and then he had you know, he had some family stuff come up. He had a new baby, and he needed it off the project, so I picked it up, and I'm gonna put this thing back together. So stay tuned for more stuff. It is the off season. I'm gonna be out in the garage working more. I'm gonna document both of these projects as well as I can. They're not going to be like informational like this project, but I have different plans for this car to do the swap a little differently. I'm going to maintain AC. I'm going to maintain all of the stock functions. The gauge cluster isn't going to be lit up like a Christmas tree like the drift car. This is going to be a more refined, more complete swap. And it's also going to cost me a lot more money. So stay tuned for that. Give me a subscribe, guys, if you want to see more stuff. And I hope you like the video.